there's so many sacrifices that
Totally.
in the industry, financial sacrifices, physical sacrifices,
Relationship sacrifices.
Yes.
Everything.
For years, the world believed that Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were the rare exception. Two superstars who managed to turn Hollywood chaos into quiet devotion. They were the calm after the storm, the couple that made even cynics believe in forever. Yet, according to whispers now echoing from the world's most watched podcast, there may have been far more beneath that polished perfection than anyone dared to imagine. And the voice behind those whispers is none other than Joe Rogan, the man known for saying what others refuse to touch. Sources close to the show claim that Joe Rogan, during an off-air conversation, hinted that Nicole Kidman hadn't just drifted away from her husband. She had warned him, long before their marriage publicly unraveled. A quiet ultimatum, a private reckoning hidden behind the smiles. For nearly 20 years, their story had been written in the language of grace. Red carpets, award speeches, soft hand-holding at galas. But when Rogan allegedly spoke of a warning, fans realized they might have been watching a love story that didn't fade, it detonated. The transformation from Hollywood's golden couple to estranged partners didn't happen overnight. It was written in tiny details that nobody noticed at the time. In April 2024, Keith Urban took the stage at the AFI tribute to honor Nicole Kidman, voice trembling as he told the crowd, "If you want to see what love in action really looks like, give that a whirl." His eyes glistened, the audience applauded, and the internet called it one of the most heartfelt tributes in years. But just 14 months later, that same love story ended with a single emoji, a red heart under Nicole's anniversary post. No words, no caption, only silence. By September 2025, court filings confirmed what fans feared. 19 years of marriage, gone. While tabloids speculated about schedules, stress, and creative distance, Joe Rogan allegedly told listeners that the cracks were visible long before. He described it, according to online chatter, as the illusion of forever built on exhaustion. It wasn't fame that destroyed them, it was what fame hid. Rogan, who has spent decades studying how pressure warps relationships, suggested that Nicole's decision to leave wasn't spontaneous. It was deliberate, the final act after discovering something that shattered trust beyond repair. The rumored story paints a scene both cinematic and heartbreaking. Nicole Kidman, ever composed, allegedly uncovered evidence of something she couldn't unsee: messages, whispers, maybe photos. The kind of proof that silences denial. Instead of rage, she chose clarity. According to what circulated among entertainment insiders, Nicole confronted Keith with calm certainty and delivered a choice no one forgets: end it, or I and us. There was no shouting, no spectacle, just the kind of truth that drains the air from a room. And in that silence, the countdown began. Joe Rogan's supposed comments hit differently because they came from someone who has lived the performer's grind himself. The lonely airports, the nameless hotel rooms, the applause that fades by dawn. He's spoken many times about how constant travel turns routine into temptation. Keith Urban, touring more than 200 days a year, was living that very paradox, adored by millions yet isolated from the one person who mattered most. Rogan allegedly connected the dots. Distance becomes danger, temptation becomes pattern, and pattern becomes secret. It wasn't proof, but it was the perfect storm. While Nicole stayed in Nashville, raising their daughters and balancing her own career, Keith kept moving, city after city, stage after stage. The rhythm of his guitar masked the rhythm of absence. And for someone like Nicole Kidman, who built her life around quiet control, that chaos must have felt like betrayal, long before it turned into evidence. When Rogan reportedly unpacked that theory, fans flooded forums calling it the most believable version yet. Because it didn't rely on scandal, it relied on human nature. By the time legal documents became public, the numbers spoke louder than any interview ever could. Nicole Kidman was granted roughly 300 days of custody per year. Keith Urban barely 60. A 19-year partnership reduced to figures on paper. No dramatic battle, no drawn-out hearings, just signatures and stillness. To Rogan's analytical audience, that kind of speed meant leverage. It suggested that Nicole already held the power, maybe even the proof, and that Keith understood fighting back would only make things worse. It wasn't about money. Both waived spousal support. It wasn't about image, and the damage was already done. It was about containment. a silent agreement to end the story before it swallowed them both. Publicly, Keith Urban said nothing. He kept performing, releasing songs that fans now dissect line by line for hidden meanings. Nicole Kidman, ever poised, said even less. Her interviews turned reflective, spiritual, grounded, the language of a woman who had already made peace with the wreckage. Yet every clip, every post, every glance between them from earlier years began to feel haunted. Viewers replayed their old award show moments, searching for signs they'd missed. The faint hesitation in Keith's smile, the polite distance in Nicole's applause. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan's alleged theory became a phenomenon of its own, dissected by gossip pages, amplified by fans, denied by no one. Some claim to have heard fragments of the conversation on social media before the clips vanished. Others swore it never existed, that it was internet fiction dressed as revelation. But the reason it spread so fast wasn't because it was proven. It was because it felt true. Because every perfect story needs a fracture. Every fairy tale hides a warning. To Rogan, the tale of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban was less about infidelity and more about illusion. The way celebrities curate devotion, the same way studios edit films. Frame by frame until the audience believes the fantasy. And maybe that's why his alleged words struck so deep. He didn't have to confirm anything. He only had to suggest that the love we envied was never what it seemed. What happened behind those closed doors might never be spoken aloud. But as Rogan's voice lingers across digital airwaves, one thing becomes clear. Sometimes the loudest revelations are the ones wrapped in silence. When the world saw Keith Urban crying on stage in 2024, they thought they were witnessing devotion. But when the divorce headlines hit a year later, that same moment felt different, almost like foreshadowing. The speech that once made people believe in love now sounded like a man already writing his goodbye. And that's exactly what Joe Rogan allegedly pointed out. How emotions can double as performances, how sincerity can look identical to guilt when replayed in hindsight. Fans began to rewatch everything. The way Keith looked at Nicole Kidman at award shows, the pauses in interviews, the subtle cracks that everyone missed when the cameras were rolling. Even his songs started to sound confessional. Lyrics once seen as poetic now felt like coded apologies. And through it all, Joe Rogan's supposed comments refused to fade. Because when a man like Rogan, known for dissecting psychology, ego, and fame, connects dots between silence and guilt, people listen. Those who follow his podcast know he doesn't deal in gossip. He dissects human behavior, how pressure exposes the truth. According to the circulating reports, Rogan didn't accuse anyone. He analyzed the pattern. He drew parallels between Keith Urban's life on the road and the slow collapse of connection that fame always breeds. The long absences, the adoration that never feels enough, the temptation that travels with the tour bus. For Nicole Kidman, who once described herself as a homebody who finds peace in stillness, that lifestyle was a slow kind of heartbreak. But what if Rogan's theory wasn't about betrayal at all? What if it was about timing? Two people evolving in different directions while the cameras never stopped rolling? In that sense, the alleged warning wasn't an accusation. It was a moment of truth between two people who both realized love wasn't enough to survive distance. Still, one question kept haunting fans. Why would Joe Rogan even speak on their marriage? Why risk entering that delicate space between public curiosity and private pain? The answer lies in what he's built his entire career on, calling out facades. Over the years, Rogan has turned countless cultural myths inside out. Whether it's fame, politics, or morality, his philosophy remains the same. Truth survives exposure. So if he truly mentioned Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, it wasn't to humiliate, it was to humanize. That's why his alleged remarks hit so hard. Because they weren't about two celebrities. They were about every couple who performs happiness while quietly unraveling. About how silence in public often means shouting in private. And about how sometimes the story you sell to the world becomes the cage that traps you. Behind the legal statements and polite social media posts, the reality was simple. Nicole Kidman walked away first. She did so without spectacle, without bitterness. Friends later described her as peaceful but final. Keith Urban, in contrast, threw himself into work. Another tour, another album, another curtain call. Yet none of it felt triumphant. Every guitar riff sounded like denial. Every smile a disguise. The custody arrangement, 306 days to Nicole, 59 to Keith, became the silent headline. It wasn't just a number. It was a confession carved in paperwork. No fighting, no objections, no leaks. Just quiet consent. Rogan's followers, trained to read between lines, saw that silence as acknowledgement. Sometimes you don't argue when you already know you're wrong. And yet, amid the noise, no one could prove Joe Rogan ever said the words that started it all. There was no verified clip, no transcript, no timestamp. Only fragments. Forum threads, podcast recaps. Fan blogs claiming they heard it before it vanished. Maybe that's why the theory spread so fast. It lived in that perfect space between plausibility and myth. Because in today's world, truth doesn't need proof, it needs emotion. When something feels true, people fill in the blanks themselves. And in this case, every detail, the emojis, the custody split, the speed of the divorce, fit too neatly. It became irresistible. A morality tale disguised as celebrity gossip. What makes Rogan's supposed take powerful is how it mirrors his usual themes. He often says fame doesn't corrupt people, it reveals them. It amplifies what's already there. For Keith, that might have been loneliness wrapped in charm. For Nicole, control wrapped in kindness. Together, they built a love story that couldn't survive its own reflection. By the time the dust settled, both had moved on quietly. Nicole Kidman appeared serene, focusing on films and her children. Keith Urban performed under bright lights, but even fans noticed the subtle change. His songs grew softer, his stage banter quieter. The man who once filled arenas with joy now performed like someone singing to ghosts. That's the tragedy Joe Rogan allegedly highlighted. Not infidelity, but isolation. How two people can love each other deeply, yet still lose the rhythm that once made them move as one. His listeners debated endlessly. Is that really betrayal, or just the slow fading of connection? In the absence of proof, speculation became scripture. Entertainment outlets began quoting anonymous producers and off-air remarks, feeding the cycle until truth and rumor were indistinguishable. And that's where the real story lies, not in what Rogan said, but in how easily people believed he did. Because belief, in the digital age, is its own kind of evidence, even now. Fans scroll through clips, freeze-framing interviews for micro-expressions, inventing closure out of fragments. And maybe that's the point. In a culture obsessed with receipts, silence feels suspicious. Yet sometimes silence isn't concealment, it's mercy. Nicole Kidman's quiet dignity and Keith Urban's wordless compliance tell us more than any headline ever could. So did Joe Rogan truly expose a secret? Or did the audience create one because they needed it to make sense? Maybe that's what he wanted us to realize all along. That in the modern world, the line between truth and storytelling has vanished. We no longer wait for confirmation. We choose the version that comforts us, and maybe in this story, everyone got what they wanted. Nicole Kidman found peace. Keith Urban found distance. Joe Rogan, intentionally or not, reminded millions that love, real love, isn't what you post. It's what survives when no one's watching. In the end, the truth might be simpler than all the theories. A marriage ended. A family rearranged. A silence that spoke louder than scandal. And maybe that's enough. Because sometimes the biggest revelation isn't what was said. It's what was left unsaid. It's what was left unsaid.